All right, hello everyone. Thank you for joining us for our third and final session of this three-part interactive series with the Forest Service and the Nature Conservancy as we tie a bow on talking about the role stewardship plays in improving tree health. During our first session, we started digging into the research. Last week, we focused on the tools and methods for community-based stewardship research and tree health monitoring. And today we'll walk through the process of setting up a tree health or stewardship data collection effort in your community. My name is Matt Spitzen. I'm the program manager of the Alliance for Community Trees program at the Arbor Day Foundation. And I'm happy to reintroduce you to your three speakers and session facilitators today. Today, you'll continue to hear from Dr. Michelle Johnson and Dr. Rich Hallett, who are research ecologists with the USDA Forest Service New York Urban Field Station, as well as Rachel Holmes, Urban Forestry Strategist for the Nature Conservancy. I just want to remind you that we are recording this conversation and we will send out the recording once it's edited and uploaded. It will also be hosted on the ACT Member Resource Center, and just please reach out to me if you need help accessing that member area. Please feel free to ask questions via the chat area on Zoom or use the raise your hand feature as well, and then we can unmute you to answer your questions. We'll be sure to also leave time at the end for more questions, but this should be a pretty interactive session today. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to my friend and Yankee fan, Rachel Holmes.
Yeah, so hey Matt, I just want to say, guys, opening day, that's my first and most important point of this workshop. So if you hear nothing else from me, it's just go Yankees. Kidding guys, but seriously, the baseball season is starting today and I couldn't be more happy for that fact, except for the fact that I am thrilled to be back here. Our third webinar, as Matt mentioned, and again, I just want to express our deep, deep gratitude to Alliance for Community Trees. And as I've been saying these past two times, not just for the work you do for Alliance for Community Trees and for your being here on these, or at least on this webinar today, and for many of you, the past two webinars, we're just so grateful for all the work that you do in the community now more than ever. So thank you, Matt, and thank you to all of the members for your work. So wanted to just, again, open up the opportunity to learn who you are and where you're from. By the way, we do take a little recording of the chats, and so it's really great for us to hear who's on and where you're from. So that's very helpful. So, yep, if you don't mind, just share who you are, your org or group, and as I always say, either where you're from in the world or where you're from in your house, which some of us is our world right now. All right, so just recalibrating to the purpose and the goals for this whole series. Really what we're after, folks, is sort of, if you can think about it this way, a joint venture, a joint investigation of what the relationship is between stewardship and tree health. So what we're actually after is a partnership with you around a sort of research project that will help you address questions you have or management needs you have while contributing to this greater good of tackling these really important questions about the value, the true value of stewardship. We all know that there's significant gains from doing stewardship, but we'd really love to be able to actually say with data what those impacts are. And as Matt mentioned on the first session, Michelle did an excellent job, and Rich both did an excellent job of giving an overview of where we are with some of that research. We're not where we want to be, and so that's why we're coming to you with this conversation today. So again, the first session, Michelle and Rich gave an overview of where the Forest Service is with regard to tree stewardship research as well as tree health and what that overlap is. Last week, we went over some tools and methods that you can use for this question of stewardship's impact on tree health. And we did focus on a digital tool, i.e. the Healthy Trees, Healthy Cities tool. And I just want to point out, we had an offline conversation with someone who mentioned, that some people are really screened out. And so I do want to acknowledge that that's an excellent point. Unfortunately, at this point, we're interested in not only helping you to engage people, but also getting more data and getting our methods out there so more people prioritize a non-stressor specific tree health approach. And so unfortunately, we're sort of limited to the tools we have, but I also want to point out that we do have paper data sheets, paper sheets that go over the methods that could be used if people are truly screened out. And so then today is really putting all the pieces together. Michelle and Rich are going to go over some of the high-level concepts behind designing a research project. Michelle is going to walk us through an example of how to set up a project. And I want to keep you informed and keep it on your radar that we are willing to help support you after this series if you choose to create a project. So today's agenda, we're going to start with an overview of research and survey design concepts. So it's just socializing some of the terms that you're hearing or that you will hear. We're not taking for granted that anybody's had courses in statistics or research design. And so we want to just orient everybody and get all on the same page with regard to the terminology. And then Rich is going to share 3 separate examples that will highlight the types of research design or the types of surveys you can set up for yourself. We're then going to have a breakout discussion. One of the things that I think is so valuable for the ACT network is the opportunity to work together and to talk and learn from each other. And so we want to provide that opportunity today. And then obviously we're going to ask you to share back anything that bubbled up, any ideas or questions when we get back to a group. And then we're going to, as I said, we'll turn it over to Michelle, who's actually going to physically walk us through, I guess physically, right? Or digitally walk us through setting up a project on the Healthy Trees, Healthy Cities project management dashboard. And then finally, we'll just reiterate that we're available to you and talk about some next steps. So before I go any further, I wanted to, last week I attempted to share with you folks a video and I couldn't quite get the sound working. So this week, Michelle, who is brilliant, has helped us figure out how to do that. So I'm going to start playing a video, and if I can get a thumbs up from Michelle or Rich that it's working. Awesome.
In this video, we will teach you how to estimate leaf discoloration for a tree, one of the 6 variables in our Healthy Trees, Healthy Cities health check. Leaf discoloration is the abnormal coloring of all or part of a leaf. It can appear as lighter color along the veins of a leaf, browning along the edges or at the tips of leaves, or even spots on the leaf. It is one of the earliest signs of stress on a tree. Keep in mind, tree leaves can be a wide range of colors and vary in color throughout the season. To identify discoloration, first identify the tree species. A field guide can help you confirm the tree's healthy leaf color. Make sure to view as much of the tree as the situation allows, viewing all sides, stepping back far enough to see the top of the crown, and looking up through the crown to view discoloration within the crown. To estimate leaf discoloration, you need to estimate the entire percentage of total leaf surface that is discolored. To do that, imagine you could take every leaf off a tree and stitch it together to form a leaf quilt. The percentage of leaf discoloration would be the total percentage of that quilt that was discolored. Let's say the quilt is made up of 100 leaves, and each one of those 100 leaves has one small mark of discoloration. We would estimate the total percentage of discoloration to be about 10% for the total area of the quilt that is discolored. It can be helpful to mentally divide the tree up into quarters, and imagine the amount of discoloration in each quarter first, adding these up to get the estimate of discoloration for the whole crown of the tree. Discoloration is measured in 25% classes, with Class 1 being no signs of discoloration to a trace amount, Class 2 being 2 to 25%, Class 3 being 26 to 50%, and so on. Once you have estimated the class of leaf discoloration, record your estimate in the Healthy Trees, Healthy Cities app.
All right. So thank you guys. Before I share my screen again for the rest of the presentation, the reason that I'm sharing that with you is I just wanted to give you an example of the types of materials that will be available to you should you choose to do the tree health protocol that we've been promoting. So those videos are subject to be done the end of next week, and we're really excited about it. And so our hope is that people will be able to learn even though we can't be there. Before I share my screen, there was a question that came up in the chat from Klaus. So Klaus asked if iTree Eco can be used to bulk upload data to the Healthy Trees, Healthy Cities app. And I just want to mention two separate things. There's actually two things going on there. Number one, the data you collect through the app can be crosswalked to iTree. I'll say it again. The data you collect through the Healthy Trees, Healthy Cities app, through the Add a Tree, where you go through species, location, DBH, etc., can be crosswalked to get the benefits calculations through iTree. So that's point number one. With regard to bulk uploading data, we made an intentional choice to not allow bulk uploads to be, sorry, that's my doorbell, not allow bulk uploads to be done through users. And the reason being that we know that data sets can take on lots of different nuances. And so going through one of the project administrators, whether that's Michelle or Rich or Chuck, our software engineers, we're able to modify the data set so that it can be uploaded simply, easily, and painlessly. All right, so thanks for that. I'm going to go back to my screen. Give me just a second here, folks. All right, are we back up? We're good? Are we back up on my screen? Yes, okay, great. All right, and there we go. All right, so as always, we'd love for you to download the app, but today the real point is about these research design concepts. And there are several of them that we're going to talk about today, that Rich is especially going to talk about, but these are the things to be thinking about as you set up a project. The very first piece is the research question. And we'll talk about that in just a second. Rich is also going to talk about your area of interest. What geography are you looking to study? And then available data is also a critical component, especially for this work. We find that it works best if there is an existing inventory, but it's not a mandate. Next thing will be sample design. Then we also want to talk about people power. How many people can you work with? How many people do you anticipate will be doing the data collection? Also your timeline, not just in terms of how long you have to do this project, but then also when in the year you're striving to do this. And then finally, the equipment piece is what we already talked about previously in last week's conversation, and so we're not necessarily going to dive into that today. But let's start with the research question. So obviously, we're very interested, and we're here because we want to support your local efforts. We want to support your local questions, your management needs. That's why we're doing this and sharing the tools that we have. But then we also have this side goal, or this equally as important goal, of building out this national network of tree health monitors and the data set that will help our evaluations be even more close to what they should be, because these scores, again, are relative. So interested in helping you with the local questions, also really committed to feeding your work into this national network and data set. And so to that end, Matt, we have a poll question that I'd love for you to put up. Awesome. So if you could just take a quick second, we'll give that maybe 20 seconds. Oh, I guess it had to be multiple choice, huh? All right. Keep them coming, guys. Great. All right, well, this is great. So this is super helpful. So there seems to be a tie, but basically you're all looking for population of tree, more about the tree population and also the benefits. So also stewardship, and then the sickest, unhealthiest trees. So it's pretty across the board. And then would you please share the next poll question, Matt? Keep them coming, guys. There's a poll question on the screen. All right. Well, this is great. So there seems to be a tie between, oh, look at that, maybe not. So you're interested in knowing whether species do better in different cities. And actually that works really well with one of the examples that Rich is going to share, comparing London plains and red maples after Hurricane Sandy. So thanks, guys, for participating. That's super helpful. But again, we are really committed to you, working with you to answer your own research questions. All right, come on, there we go. And now I just wanted to take a minute and pause on tree health and equity. And this is kind of a critical concept. You're hearing a lot about tree planting lately, especially at the federal policy level. A lot of us are thinking about how our work can help with some of the systemic racism issues that we're all learning so much more about and becoming much more aware of. And so one of the things that I did want to take a minute to point out is many of us are talking about equity and tree equity in as much as its presence or absence of canopy in parts of the city. But I want to encourage you to take that one step further and think about the quality of the canopy. So yes, it's important to know where trees are and where trees are not, but it's also important to know where healthy trees are and where unhealthy trees are not. Because we would argue that a truly equitable urban forest is one that is healthy across the board. So I want to just encourage you to think about the quality of the canopy in addition to just the quantity as we're starting these conversations around tree health and equity. All right, so I want to turn it over to Rich, who is going to talk to us about some of the more specifics of those research design concepts. Take it away, Rich.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel, and hello, everyone. As we start to think about designing our own project, we really need to focus in on the geographic extent of our project, where we'd like to work. I'm choosing New York City because we've done a lot of our development work there, and I've chosen a few examples to kind of go through and help you see how we go about setting up a project and thinking about sampling design. Go on to the next slide. And so one group we worked with was in the Hunts Point neighborhood in the Bronx. This was an area where we had some money to do some job training. It's also a neighborhood where it had a high heat vulnerability index, which is of particular interest to the New York City Parks Department because they wanted to get more trees in areas that were experiencing the urban heat island effect. And so we focused in on the Hunts Point neighborhood, and you can see a little shaded polygon around that area. And we can go to the next slide. And then the next question is there an existing tree inventory? And in this case, the New York City Parks Department had just finished their trees count campaign, where they crowdsourced data collection and did an inventory of all 750,000 trees within New York City's streets. And so we already had locations and species in DBH for trees, which, as Rachel already mentioned, we can upload into our app, which really facilitates data collection. And so that's another question you need to find out. It doesn't prevent you from doing an inventory if there aren't locations, because as we demonstrated, we can use our devices to give us GPS locations, and you can locate the trees on the map. You can go to the next slide. And so next thing to think about, once you've determined, what area you'd like to work in and whether you have a tree inventory or not, is thinking about how many trees you could hope to measure over the period of time that you have. Maybe you have a certain number of people or crews and you have one growing season, or you want to make a longer project. And the rule of thumb we use for figuring out what we can get done is basically plan on a 2-person crew to complete a tree health assessment on one tree every 5 minutes or so. Sometimes this can go quicker depending on how close the trees are together and as the teams get better, but this is a good way to kind of give an estimate of how much time it'll take. And then a question is within your area of interest, can you measure every tree? In other words, I mentioned 750,000 street trees in New York City. This is a pretty big lift for a group, and so the answer would probably be no. But in the Hunts Point area, that was a small enough chunk, and in that case, the answer was yes. And so the importance of that question sort of boils down to what kind of inventory can you do? Do you do a complete inventory, or do you need to figure out a way to do a representative sample of your area of interest? Next slide, please. And so the Hunts Point example, you can see on the left a cluster of trees that were within that area of interest, and then the results of the map that the job training group was able to accomplish. They were able to measure 4,200 trees over the course of the summer and do the tree health assessment on them. And so this is an example of a complete inventory. In other words, you're measuring every single street tree within your area of interest. Next slide, please. If you can't measure every single tree within your area of interest, in other words, there's just too many to get through, you need to figure out a way to sample. And the simplest way is a random sample, as simple as conceptually. It allows you to select trees randomly and measure fewer trees and still get good information about your area of interest. But sometimes that's not as efficient, or sometimes random samples don't yield a very good geographic distribution of your area. And so I'll go through a couple of ways that you can modify the simple random sample design. Next slide, please. Another example we use is the project that Michelle presented some results on in our first webinar. And we were trying to get an assessment of tree health across the Bronx and Manhattan. And in that case, we couldn't do, as you can see from the map on the left, there's about 150,000 trees in there. We had money to hire some interns with the Nature Conservancy, and we just couldn't get to every single tree. So we came up with a sampling design that involved gridding the city out and then selecting half-mile street segments within each grid cell. And we can go to the next slide. And so you can see on the left, the gridding strategy, that was to ensure geographic distribution of our sample. And within each grid cell, we randomly selected a starting point. On the right, you can see one grid cell. And from that starting point, we went exactly half a mile, choosing a random direction to turn when we hit an intersection. And so these were our plots, if you will. If any of you are familiar with forest measurement sampling, normally we use fixed radius plots. In the city, when we're looking at street trees, this doesn't make a lot of sense. And so we decided to do a linear half-mile segment to get around that particular area. Go to the next slide, please. So that last example was a systematic random sampling design. Another example is a stratified random sample. And in this case, we came up with some strata or criteria, sampling criteria to answer our question of interest. And in the Hurricane Sandy study that we went through, we were trying to figure out, did the saltwater flooding of New York City street trees impact their health? And to test that, we had to measure trees that were flooded and trees that were unflooded. And we also further limited our sample to 2 different species that we suspected might have a different response to saltwater flooding based on the literature. And so our sampling criteria were that we picked trees in Queens, New York. They were greater than 4-inch DBH because we wanted mature street trees. We chose red maple and London plains, and then we chose an equal number of those species within flooded areas and within unflooded areas. And that's called a stratified random sample. And the reference to that paper is listed below. And I believe we have a link where you can get that PDF. Next slide, please. Okay, there you go, Rachel.
All right. Well, thank you for that, Rich. We want to send you over to breakouts. But before we do that, number 1, does anybody recognize this? You can say it in the chat if you do. Don't be shy. You can show your age. It's totally cool. All right. Anybody in the chat recognize this yet, Matt?
Getting some Tetris guesses.
Nope, negative. All right. Well, you know what? We're going to send you into some breakout groups, and you guys can try and figure it out on your own. And if you come back and have it, we will give you bragging rights. But seriously though, we want this, as I said in the very beginning of the conversation, we recognize the value of the ACT network is to have time to actually network and talk amongst yourselves. So if there are any questions for Rich, we'd like to just get you into the groups now. We can always answer those questions after the fact. So for the breakout groups, we're randomly assigning people. What we would really like for you to do is just have a conversation about what either what your management question is, or your management question or research question. Talk about some of your plans for data collection. Identify kind of any mutual goals you may have, and then if there are any questions that bubble up based on what we've talked about or what you may have in mind as you're preparing your plan, definitely take them back to the group. So Matt, can we randomly assign everybody to a group? And I'm thinking groups of 3 would be great.
Welcome back, everyone.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you all so much for coming back. Big ups to Klaus for getting that this is breakout from Atari. Appreciate that. All right. So what we'd like to do now is just hear from you whether there are any kind of high-level questions or thoughts. And hi, hey Klaus. Hey, high five. Good team. Whether you have any high-level thoughts or questions that came up in your conversations in your breakout groups. Be bold, be brave.
I think from ours, at least I was on with Tracy and Deborah. We talked about how we would use the tools that you've talked through and to really measure impact. And it was an interesting conversation because Tracy's newer with her group, where Deborah's had some longevity with her group. And so to understand really how do we best use this tool to say, here's what we're doing right now, and then how can we measure it over a period of time to be able to really see the impact of the ACT partners. So I thought that was, we kind of all went into it like, what should we talk about? And then we unfortunately got pulled in right in the middle of a conversation, Matt, that was really rude. Even though there was a countdown going on, we really had a lot more to talk about.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. So that was Laura, Deborah, and Tracy, right? Awesome, guys. Well, and keep in mind, you know, and that's part of this conversation is to see if there are synergies or opportunities for overlap. And, you know, we're happy to do group discussions too. Others in your breakouts that want to share.
I think in our group, which was Alyssa and Klaus and me, we were talking about like how do you accomplish something like this? So and how to, and maybe are there barriers for everyday people to be able to use the app and so anyway, there was some good, like Klaus had some good suggestions, which I'm sure he'll share with you, about like ease of the app and stuff. And Alyssa, you know, she's doing some things with schools and sort of outfitting a school when you plant it, say, now you're in charge of following the health of these trees and please use this app and we're going to train you how. And that's something that we could really replicate too. I love the thought of getting not just us and our staff doing this, but how do we get a lot of people interested in looking at their trees and marking them? So what are the paths that you could take to that? So that was some of the conversation we had. It was good.
Dang, guys, I'm really impressed. Like, this is awesome stuff. And so before I turn it over to Michelle, I have just an open request. And by the way, it's lovely to see everybody's faces. Thank you for using your screens. I have an open request to you all, if it's possible for us to follow up with you. You all have really great ideas, and just what you were saying, Jen, in terms of the barriers for people to be able to use these tools, that's really critical information that would be very helpful to us to have. So I'm looking at each of you guys as kind of our partners, and I would love to just reach out to you and get more thoughts and feedback from you as we go along. Because one little piece that's worth mentioning is that we're getting ready to develop some better data visualization resources. And we really want to make sure we're responding to the needs of our users. So thank you for that. Michelle, I am going to turn it over to you.
Hey everyone, I'm going to share my screen now and demo the project dashboard. So can everyone see my screen? It should just be the Healthy Trees, Healthy Cities website. Great. Okay, so I'm just going to move you guys out of the way for this. What you want to do is up at the top right, click the login button first, and you'll get this screen. So if you haven't already created a profile, you click create profile and sign up. You'll get an email with the link and register. Pretty standard stuff. So I'll just go ahead and log myself in. So here's the trick. Then now that you're logged in, you'll see the same basic screen, but up at the top, you can see you're logged in. It'll say my account instead of login. So you'll just want to click my account. And that'll take you to the kind of main screen of the dashboard, and you'll have some options. You can view the trees that are in your My Trees, which are trees that are assigned to you or trees you've collected data on from the app. You can set up a new project, or you can scroll down and look at projects that already exist. So I am going to show you what set up a new project looks like quickly, and then Frank Rogers sent in last week his worksheet and got a prize from Rachel from the Capstone Institute, and he picked Berkeley Springs, West Virginia as the area. So I'll just show what I set up from that. But essentially, I clicked set up a new project, and it took me to this screen. So I navigated myself to Berkeley Springs, West Virginia by typing it in here. And then I used this button here to go ahead and select it. And I zoomed out a little to make sure that I got the full area. But essentially, you can draw a bounding box about the area of your interest. If you don't like it, you can hit delete. You saw I was going over here on the right to zoom in and zoom out. And also you can use this panning icon here to set it up. Then once you have the area you want, then you can go in and fill in some details about what's your project name, what's the overall description of your project, what's the extent where you're working, give it a name, talk about your objectives, the city you're working in, and then check off, do you want to track doing health checks? Do you want to track stewardship? Or do you also want to do pest detection? So you can just check those on or off. And then you can say, do I want my project to be visible to the public? That means if other users log in, they could see your project. Or do you want to just keep it private? And so you can pick either of those, hit submit, and it'll create a project. So I'm going to navigate to the project I created. If I click the Manage Project page of what I created, you'll see it's exactly that, create a new project, but with things filled in. So here's the project description, the project extent, the objectives, and I made it not visible for now, but you can adjust it once you've created the project. And so Frank had said he was interested in mapping and monitoring the street tree population of Berkeley Springs, West Virginia, and that they had a comprehensive inventory from 2010. And so if that 2010 inventory had latitude, longitude, or some other sort of geospatial location, we could bulk upload it in the same way someone had asked about doing that with iTree. And then the trees would already be imported in here. Or you could collect one by one the trees in Add a Tree on the app as well. Those are both of the options. And it looks like Frank was interested in following the health and the vitality of street trees. So that speaks to me of doing health checks and the pest detection. And also he mentioned these were the types of tree-related work his group did. They did planting, pruning, mulching, and removing trees. So being able to track that as well. So just listed those under project objectives. So that's as far as I filled out the project, and it takes all that information and it puts it over here on the right. The next thing to do would be if you do have trees loaded in or there's trees that were already collected, you can add trees to the project. We had sent you guys with a little bit of homework last week to go out and map a few trees. And it looks like Frank did that for 2 trees. So what we can do is select those trees. It's that same kind of bounding box idea where you would, I'm just gonna go around and select those 2. And then I'm gonna click add to project. It says trees are added. So now if I scroll down, should have 2 trees in the project. So here is one, and here is the other one. So some basic just names. You could also add DBH or add some of the other min set under add a tree as well. The trees. So now the trees are in the project. And go back to project home. And we can assign those trees to people. So under manage trees, we can assign those trees to colleagues, or we can do a number of other options. So I'm going to select those trees. They've been added to the project, but I want to say I'm going to do these 2 trees, and I want to manage them. So I could go ahead and say, hey, we've watered them this week. That could be an option under adding tree care activities. Get out of water, spent, like 1 hour this week, and, it was Frank and Michelle went out to water trees. Add some notes. We're going to be adding the date here. These are things that you can already track in the app as well, but you can bulk assign some things, so it just makes it a little easier than if you went out and watered all the trees over 4 blocks. You could do that here versus having to do it one by one with the app. So I'm not going to hit submit just because it's pretend, but it gives you an idea of that. We could also assign trees. So I've added myself, Rich, and Rachel to this project. So I'm going to assign Rachel these 2 trees. And they've now been assigned. So their color is now blue, where it was red before, because when they're unassigned, they're red. When they're assigned, they turn blue. When they're completed, they would turn green. And when they're flagged, so flagged would be, hey, I looked at the data and something seems a little off, but I want somebody to check it. You can change it to flag. And the way to do that is the next option under manage trees. Is select those 2 again. And I can change the tree status. And I could pick any of those options. I'm just going to move them back to unassigned. Hit submit. And then the last option is I could remove trees from the project. If I was like, we're not studying those 2 trees, I could just go ahead and remove them from the project. They're not removed from the database. They're just not associated with the project anymore, but I'll just leave them in the project for now. Here's those 2 trees. Now they've show up in the bottom with the data that's been added. You can filter them by if DBH was added, so if it was a larger data set. You can also, if the stress index from the tree health check was measured, you could filter that way. Or you could say, I only want to see in the table below those trees that are assigned. So now there's none. If I switch it back to unassigned, those 2 trees pop back up. And so it allows you to just quickly look through, oh, I just want to look at the flagged trees, as an option. So go back to all of them. And so that's essentially if you want to manage the trees. We can also manage participants. And so that means selecting who's involved. Here's me, Rich, and Rachel. I could add users to the project. So if I wanted to add somebody else, so anybody that's already has a login would just pop up in under users. I could also select a team if I had created a team, and I can change people to be project leader or participant. Project leader really gives you all the access to change all of the things I'm showing you right now. I'm the project leader for this sample project. Or you can set somebody to be a participant if they just get trees assigned to them and they know I need to go and find the trees that are in my trees and go out and collect the data and then report back to the project leader. So there's those two roles. You can create a team, so we could set Rich and Rachel to be a team, and we could call them the New York Yankees. Right, and now they're a team. It shows up right here that they're part of that team. And if I wanted to make assignments, it could be at the team level or at the individual participant level. And then you can go over here and adjust roles. I can switch. So I'm no longer the project leader. Now somebody else becomes the project leader. I can change teams. I can see who's assigned what. I can remove somebody from a project if they leave and are no longer involved. I can add notes to the user, and you can shoot an email to everyone as well. So if it's thinking right now, but it would generate an email with the three of us in our emails so that you can send an email out to everybody. And I know Rachel is interested in times for questions, so I'm going to leave with just one last thing, which is, well, two things. One is being able to download your project trees. So if trees are added to a project and you click download project trees, you would get an email with a link to a CSV file for all the data of the trees that are in the project. And so that's now going to be my inbox in a couple minutes. And that's really a great way to be able to extract all the data and play with it in a different way. And then here's just some basic summaries of those two trees that I added to the project. One had a full check. The other one was just done with add a tree. And then, here's some basic information about those trees. And I think I'll end there and switch it back to Rachel.
Awesome. Michelle is nothing short of amazing. She has mastered the dashboard, and she is just an excellent representative for what we can do with that tool. So thank you so much, Michelle. I really appreciate it. And just another further note is that when she assigns trees, they show up on my phone. So the two systems do work together. So it's a really nice way to stay in touch with the people that are out there doing the data collection or doing the stewardship through your desktop. So I wanted to keep that on your radar. All right, so we're down to a couple minutes left, and I wanted to just open up the floor for, oh, okay, so Deborah asked a question. You said it can be made available to the public. Do you mean the real public or other users already inside the project space? So do you mean the data download, Deborah? Or do you mean the tools?
I think
the very beginning, when you were saying how it was set up, the users, you used the word public, and I thought it sort of meant the users, the people inside the project you wanted in the project.
If you set it to public, it means other people that also use the Healthy Trees, Healthy Cities dashboard can see your project. So let's say, you're working in Boston, somebody else is working in Boston. You want them to know that you're collecting data. They can see the data you're collecting.
Awesome. Other questions about any of it, the whole series? Fair game.
So Rachel, what do you think? I mean, what would be the next steps that we should do then at this point? Wait for you to get back to us, or I get my head wrapped around it, but still, I don't want to forget about it.
Sure. Yeah. So thank you, Jen, and I really appreciate that. So Klaus mentioned really quickly. I just want to answer his question. How many trees can we upload? I'm assuming you mean upload into the system, and as many as you want. There's no limit. So there's that point. And so, yeah, Jen, I think the next steps are, we'll email out the group that's gone through the series. So you have our contact information. I know I emailed you all yesterday as well. As far as next steps go, we're available. we're certainly not, we recognize these are challenging times for people, and some people are doing field work, some cannot. So we're certainly not going to try and make extra work for you, but we are available. Here's what I envision happening. You take these tools, take the webinars, take the notes, figure out whether this is something you want to tackle, and get in touch with us, and we can help you out with whatever it is that you need, whether that's access to training materials for your constituents to get more data collectors on board, whether that's support with the dashboard, whether that's uploading an inventory because you want to do data collection. Any of that is fair game, or research questions or setup, any of that is fair game. The second thing would be, yeah, we're here. I mean, we're here to support you. The other piece that we're looking for is just some support around our data visualization conversation, which we're hoping to have very soon. And to that end, we will likely at some point, maybe in the next month or two, reach out to some of you just to get some thoughts on data visualization, like what would be helpful to see on a map, etc. Okay, so there's a couple questions that have come up in the chat. We have a database of over 100,000 trees. I mean, Michelle, Rich?
Yeah, I think that's in reference to how many trees could be uploaded. And, you know, like you said, there's really not a limit to uploading the trees. It's just a matter of getting the, you know, that number of trees formatted properly to be uploaded into the database.
Cool. And then, so Sarah is asking, if someone is collecting data using Healthy Trees, Healthy Cities, can we pull their data into a project? And the answer is yes. Michelle, do you want to say any more about that?
Yeah, the trees will show up since there are, and then if you select anything, any data that is collected with Healthy Trees, Healthy Cities associated with that tree would then be included in your project.
All right, and then, so Klaus asks if you can make a distinction between private versus public trees. That's really interesting. We currently don't have that capability in the app or on the dashboard. However, what I would say is on each of the modules, so add a tree, insect or pest detection, stewardship, and tree health, there's a notes section. And the notes section shows up in the data set when you get it. So we've worked with groups before, municipalities, community groups, tree NGOs, where they have very specific things they want to know. Like, let's say they want to know which trees are under power lines. So they give specific instructions to data collectors to use the notes fields for those specific things that are not part of our protocol. And then you would be able to, as long as you're intentional about using the notes section, you would be able to search through the data set that way. And then Deb makes a point that she likes that there's different levels of engagement through the dashboard, and you say that's neat. And I think it's neat that you use the word neat. More of us need to use the word neat. I really appreciate that. One more question. This is all about tree health and care. Are there financial resources out there to help address the health needs that we might find? I know pruning old trees is a big concern here, but the money is a barrier. Jen? Amen. Amen, Jen, amen. All I can say to that is a perennial problem for us in the field. PNC, Forest Service, tree planting will always be sexier than stewardship. However, you know, that is something that TNC has taken on and we will continue to try to work on. I know that there are potential grant sources maybe coming up that will focus on stewardship, who knows? But we will continue to do our part at TNC to try to lift the tide of stewardship resources. So I am making that commitment to this group here today. And then are you planning to include AR like the Arboreal app on iOS? Automatic measurement of DBH and tree height with the camera requires newer iPhone. Rich, you can take that one because I know you've been doing some additional work with others.
No, not right now. We're not. I've been working with a group at MIT and using Google Street View, and there's been some others doing some of that work. There's some promise there, but we don't have plans to do that with our app at this point. That sort of is a leap above what we're hoping to accomplish right now.
Excellent. All right, and the last question I'll take, and then we're going to send you on your merry way, is will you let us know when the instructional videos for Healthy Trees are ready? Absolutely. We will absolutely let you know, and that actually will be a good trigger point for us to follow up on this series in general and an invitation to get in touch with us for help setting up a project. So thank you all so much. Thank you, Matt. I'm going to turn it over to you. This has been so helpful to us, and we really appreciate everybody's time.
Yeah, thank you to our three presenters, and thank you everyone for joining us today and throughout these 3 weeks. We're so appreciative of you taking the time with us, and we hope it proved to be beneficial for you all. Earlier this week, I sent out the PowerPoint slides from last week's session, so I'll be sure to do that with today's, and I'll be sure to send out their 3 email addresses again for you too. As I mentioned before, this call has been recorded and will be uploaded to the Alliance for Community Trees Member Resource Center, and I'll be emailing that link out as well. So if you're a member and unsure of how to access that member portal, again, please reach out to me. Again, thank you all for joining, and we hope you have a great rest of your week. Thank you all.